Aria's hands shake as she signs, "I can't do this," to her reflection, her baby's cries echoing from the next room while her friend's voice crackles through the phone. "He's already at the cafe, Aria. Just this once, trust me." "Sarah, you don't understand." Aria signed frantically, even though her friend couldn't see her through the phone. She grabbed her notepad and scribbled quickly, then read aloud in the halting voice she rarely used. "I look terrible. You look beautiful. You always look beautiful. And Marcus seems really nice. I met him at the community center last week. He's patient, kind, and he specifically said he didn't mind that you're deaf." Aria winced. She wasn't deaf, she could hear perfectly. She just couldn't speak properly, hadn't been able to since the accident that took her parents when she was 12. The words got trapped somewhere between her brain and her throat, coming out strangled and broken when they came at all. Most people assumed she was deaf, and it was easier to let them think that than explain the truth. Rosie's wails grew louder from the nursery, and Aria felt her chest tighten. 8 months old and already so much work. Beautiful, perfect work, but work nonetheless. Between double shifts at Murphy's Diner and the sleepless nights, Aria barely had energy to shower, let alone date. "I have to go. Rosie needs. I'm already on my way over to babysit. Don't you dare use that baby as an excuse to hide in that apartment for another 6 months." The line went dead. Aria stared at her phone, then at her reflection. Dark circles shadowed her green eyes, and her auburn hair hung limp around her shoulders. The one decent dress she owned, a simple navy blue piece from before Rosie, still fit barely. She'd lost too much weight lately, stress and exhaustion stealing her appetite. 20 minutes later, Sarah burst through the door like a hurricane, all blonde curls and determination. She took one look at Aria and immediately started fussing, applying concealer under her eyes and braiding her hair into something that actually looked intentional. "You're going," Sarah declared, scooping Rosie from her crib. "This Marcus guy runs some kind of security business. Very successful, very single, and, according to my source, very handsome." Aria grabbed her notepad. "What if he's expecting someone normal? You are normal. You're a wonderful mother working 2 jobs to support your daughter. Any man worth your time will see that." Sarah bounced Rosie gently. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen? You have coffee, make polite conversation, and come home. Low stakes." But as Aria walked the 4 blocks to Moonbeam Cafe, her stomach churned with each step. She'd never been on a blind date. Hell, she'd never been on any kind of date since high school. Before Rosie's father had charmed his way into her bed, and then disappeared the moment she'd told him about the pregnancy. The cafe was small and warm, filled with mismatched furniture and the scent of cinnamon. Aria spotted him immediately. He was the only man sitting alone, and Sarah hadn't exaggerated about the handsome part. Tall even while seated, with dark hair and the kind of broad shoulders that filled out his black sweater perfectly. When he looked up and their eyes met, Aria felt something strange flutter in her chest. His eyes were golden brown, warm and patient as she approached his table. He stood immediately, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "Aria." His voice was deep, gentle. When she nodded, he smiled. "I'm Marcus. Thank you for coming." She pulled out her phone and typed quickly, showing him the screen. "Thank you for being patient with this arrangement. Sarah can be very persistent." Marcus chuckled, and the sound sent an unexpected warmth through her. "She mentioned you prefer to communicate this way. I know some ASL if that's easier." Aria blinked in surprise. Most people either spoke too loudly or avoided eye contact entirely once they realized she was mute. She signed slowly. "You know sign language?" "Some. My sister is deaf." His signing was careful but accurate. "Coffee?" "I already ordered. Hope you don't mind. Sarah mentioned you like vanilla lattes." As he returned with their drinks, Aria studied him. Everything about Marcus seemed deliberate, controlled. The way he moved with fluid grace despite his size, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, the careful distance he maintained between them. Like a man used to being in charge, used to protecting things. They'd been talking, or rather, she'd been typing and he'd been responding, for 20 minutes when the cafe door chimed. Sarah rushed in, Rosie crying in her arms. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said breathlessly. "She won't stop fussing, and I think she wants her mama." Aria felt her cheeks burn as every head in the cafe turned toward them. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. Being exposed as the struggling single mother she really was instead of the put-together woman she'd tried to pretend to be for one evening. She reached for Rosie, but Marcus was already standing. "May I?" Sarah looked surprised but handed the baby over. Arya watched in amazement as Marcus cradled Rosie against his chest, one large hand supporting her head while the other rubbed gentle circles on her back. He started humming something low and melodic, and miraculously, Rosie's cries began to quiet. "She's beautiful," Marcus said softly, his golden eyes fixed on the baby's face. "How old?" 8 months, Arya signed, still stunned by how natural he looked holding her daughter. "She has your eyes." Marcus looked up at Arya, and something passed between them, something that made her breath catch. "And she's lucky to have such a devoted mother." No questions about Rosie's father. No judgment in his expression. Just acceptance, as if single mothers and crying babies were perfectly normal parts of a first date. Sarah cleared her throat. "I should go. Unless, do you need me to take her home?" Arya looked at Marcus, who was still swaying slightly with Rosie now sleeping peacefully in his arms. The sight did something strange to her heart. "She seems comfortable," Arya typed, showing Marcus the message. "She's welcome to stay," he said. "Unless you'd prefer." Arya shook her head, settling back into her chair. For the first time in months, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. The simple pleasure of adult conversation, of being seen as more than just a tired waitress or exhausted mother. They talked until the cafe closed, Marcus holding Rosie the entire time, adjusting her position when she stirred but never seeming bothered by her presence. He told her about his security business, carefully avoiding details but making it clear he worked with people who needed protection. She told him about her job at Murphy's, about how she was saving for nursing school, about her dreams of giving Rosie a better life. When it was time to leave, Marcus walked them to Arya's apartment building. The evening air was crisp, and Arya pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself. "I had a really good time tonight," Marcus said as they reached her door. He transferred the sleeping Rosie carefully back to Arya's arms. Would you like to do this again? Maybe dinner next time." Arya felt that flutter again, stronger now. She fumbled for her phone one-handed while balancing Rosie. "I'd like that. But you should know, I'm not looking for anything casual. I can't afford to be." Marcus read the message, then looked directly into her eyes. "Neither am I. I'm looking for something real, Arya. Something that lasts." The way he said it, with such quiet certainty, made her believe him. Made her want to believe in possibilities she'd given up on months ago. "Saturday? After my shift ends at 6? I'll pick you up at 7. Marcus stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woodsy and warm. "Thank you for trusting me with tonight." With her. As Arya watched him walk away, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted in her world. Marcus moved like a man comfortable in his own skin, but there was something else there too. Something wild and carefully contained that called to parts of herself she'd forgotten existed. Inside her apartment, she settled Rosie in her crib and caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. For the first time in months, she looked like more than just a tired mother. She looked like a woman who'd been seen, really seen, by a man who hadn't run at the first sign of complications in her life. Saturday suddenly couldn't come fast enough. Chapter 2. Marcus Kane stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his downtown penthouse office, watching the city sprawl below as Saturday's sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and gold. The colors reminded him of Arya's eyes, and he found himself checking his watch again. 6:30. In 30 minutes, he'd be picking her up for dinner. He should be preparing for tomorrow's council meeting instead. Should be reviewing the treaties that would solidify his PAC's control over the Northern Territories. Should be considering the political marriage his advisors kept pushing, the alliance with the Blackwood PAC that would secure his bloodline and strengthen their borders. Instead, all he could think about was the way Arya had looked at him when he'd held her daughter, the trust in her green eyes when she'd agreed to see him again. His phone buzzed. A text from his beta, David. "Council's expecting an answer about the Blackwood proposal by Monday. Celeste arrived this morning. She's displeased that you haven't responded to her calls." Marcus deleted the message without responding. Celeste Blackwood had been chosen for him before he'd even met her. A perfect political match with impeccable bloodlines and a ruthless ambition that matched her beauty. She was everything an Alpha King's mate should be. She wasn't Arya. The thought was dangerous, treasonous even. He was the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, responsible for over 2,000 wolves across 6 states. His mate choice affected thousands of lives, trade agreements, territorial disputes. He couldn't throw it all away for a human woman who didn't even know what he was. But when he'd held Rosie in that cafe, when the baby had settled against his chest with complete trust, something had shifted in his wolf. Some primal instinct had whispered mine with a certainty that had nothing to do with politics or bloodlines. Marcus straightened his tie and headed for the elevator. He was picking up Arya in 20 minutes, and he refused to let pack politics ruin what might be his only chance at something real. The drive to Arya's neighborhood took him from the gleaming towers of downtown into a part of the city most of his kind avoided. Too many humans, too much chaos, too many scents mixing together. But as he parked outside her building, Marcus felt more at peace than he had in months. Arya was waiting in the lobby, and the sight of her stole his breath. She wore a simple emerald dress that brought out her eyes, her auburn hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. But it was her smile when she saw him, shy but genuine, that made his wolf preen with satisfaction. "You clean up nice," she typed on her phone, showing him the screen with a hint of playfulness. "So do you," he said, offering his arm. "I hope you like Italian. There's a place downtown that makes incredible risotto." As they walked to his car, a sleek black Mercedes that drew appreciative glances, Marcus caught something that made every instinct snap to attention. Another wolf's scent, faint but definitely present. Someone had been watching Arya's building recently. He kept his expression neutral as he opened her door, but his mind raced. It could be coincidence. Lone wolves sometimes drifted through human neighborhoods. But the scent carried undertones of aggression, territorial marking. Someone had been hunting. The restaurant was one of his favorites, small and intimate with tables far enough apart for private conversation. Marcus had specifically chosen it because the owner was human, and the clientele was unlikely to include anyone from the supernatural community. Arya seemed to relax as they settled into their corner booth, the soft lighting and quiet atmosphere putting her at ease. She pulled out her phone to type, then hesitated. "What is it?" Marcus asked gently. "I've never been somewhere this nice," she finally showed him. "I feel underdressed." "You're perfect," Marcus said, and meant it. "You could wear a paper bag and outshine every woman in here." Her cheeks flushed pink, and she looked down at her menu. Marcus found himself studying her profile, the elegant line of her neck, the way she worried her lower lip when she was thinking. His enhanced senses picked up her scent, warm vanilla, and something uniquely her that made his wolf want to mark her as his own. The thought shocked him with its intensity. He'd never experienced anything like this instant, overwhelming attraction. Even in his teenage years, when hormones and wolf instincts had run wild, he'd maintained control. But Arya made him want to forget about control, about duty, about everything except the way she smiled when she looked at him. They ordered dinner. She chose the butternut squash ravioli after he assured her it was one of the chef's specialties, and fell into easy conversation. She told him about her nursing school applications, her hopes of eventually working in pediatrics. He found himself sharing more than he'd intended about his business, carefully editing out the supernatural elements, but describing the satisfaction of protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. "You have that look," Arya typed during a lull in conversation. "What look?" "Like you're used to being in charge. Like people come to you when they need problems solved." Marcus paused, surprised by her perceptiveness. "Is that a bad thing?" "No," she typed quickly. "It's reassuring. I haven't felt safe in a long time. But I feel safe with you." The simple honesty of the statement hit him harder than any declaration of love could have. She trusted him, this woman who had every reason to be wary of men, who was raising a daughter alone and working herself to exhaustion. She felt safe with him. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Her skin was soft, warm, and he felt the slight tremble in her fingers. "You are safe with me, Arya. I promise you that." She turned her hand palm up, threading their fingers together, and Marcus had to concentrate on not letting his wolf's reaction show. The simple touch sent heat racing through his system, and he caught her slight intake of breath that suggested she felt it too. They were sharing dessert, a decadent chocolate torte that made Arya's eyes flutter closed in bliss, when Marcus caught the scent again. Wolves. Multiple wolves. And they were getting closer. Every muscle in his body tensed, but he kept his expression neutral. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, rising smoothly. "I'll be right back." He made it 3 steps toward the restroom before the restaurant's front door exploded inward. 3 wolves in human form stalked through the entrance, their eyes already shifted to the golden glow that marked their other nature. Marcus recognized them immediately, Blackwood enforcers, Celeste's cousins. They moved with predatory grace, heads turning as they scanned the restaurant for his scent. "Everyone stay calm," the lead wolf announced, his voice carrying the subtle growl of barely controlled transformation. We're looking for someone. Nobody needs to get hurt. Panic rippled through the human diners. Chairs scraped against the floor as people tried to back away, confused by the intruder's strange eyes and threatening presence. The maitre d' was reaching for the phone behind his podium. Marcus stepped into their line of sight, putting himself between the wolves and Aria's table. "Gentlemen, you're causing a scene." Marcus, the leader, Jonathan Blackwood, smiled, showing teeth that were already beginning to elongate. "Exactly who we came to find. You've been avoiding Celeste's calls." "I've been busy." Marcus could feel his own wolf pressing against his human skin, responding to the threat. Behind him, he heard Aria's sharp intake of breath. "Too busy for your intended mate?" Jonathan's voice dropped to a threatening rumble. "The pack council's getting impatient. Celeste's getting impatient. Her father sent us to remind you of your obligations." Marcus felt the familiar rush of alpha power flooding his system, the supernatural strength and speed that had kept him alive through countless challenges to his authority. "And I'm reminding you that you're in human territory, making a public spectacle. Leave. Now. We leave when you come with us." The second wolf, smaller but with the lean build of a hunter, stepped closer. "You've embarrassed our family long enough." "I said leave." The authority in Marcus's voice hit the wolves like a physical force. Two of them actually stepped back, their wolves recognizing the alpha dominance, even as their human sides resisted. But Jonathan held his ground. "You think you can order us around? You think your pretty little human is worth starting a war over?" The mention of Aria sent rage blazing through Marcus's system. His wolf snarled, demanding blood for the implied threat. Around them, the restaurant had gone dead silent, humans sensing danger they couldn't understand. "Last warning," Marcus said quietly. Jonathan laughed and lunged. What happened next took less than 10 seconds, but Marcus knew it would change everything. His wolf's reflexes took over. He caught Jonathan mid-leap, his enhanced strength allowing him to absorb the impact and redirect the wolf's momentum into the wall. The second attacker came at him from the side, but Marcus spun with inhuman speed, his fist connecting with the wolf's solar plexus hard enough to lift him off his feet. The third wolf hesitated, seeing his packmates down, but Marcus was already moving. A precise strike to the nerve cluster at the base of the wolf's neck dropped him unconscious to the floor. 3 Blackwood enforcers, neutralized in under 10 seconds without Marcus even fully shifting. Silence stretched through the restaurant like a held breath. Then the whispers started, humans trying to process what they'd just witnessed. The maitre d' was speaking rapidly into his phone, probably calling 911. Marcus turned back to their table, his heart sinking when he saw Aria's expression. Her green eyes were wide with shock, her phone clutched in trembling hands. She'd seen everything, the inhuman speed, the strength that no ordinary human should possess. He walked back to her slowly, hands visible and unthreatening. "Aria." She held up her phone. "What are you?" "I can explain." That wasn't normal. That wasn't human. Behind them, Jonathan was groaning as he pushed himself up from the floor. Marcus heard sirens in the distance, the human authorities responding to the disturbance call. He had maybe 2 minutes before this became a much bigger problem. "We need to go," he said urgently. "Right now." Aria stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus saw the war playing out in her expressive eyes. Fear warring with trust, logic battling against the inexplicable pull she felt toward him. Finally, she stood. Marcus threw money on the table, far more than their bill, and guided her toward the back exit as the sirens grew louder. The Blackwood wolves were stirring, but they wouldn't pursue with human law enforcement so close. They made it to his car in tense silence. Marcus started the engine and pulled into traffic, his mind racing through damage control scenarios. How much had she seen? How much could he explain away? "My apartment," Aria typed, showing him the screen. The drive back to her neighborhood felt like the longest 20 minutes of Marcus's life. When he parked outside her building, Aria didn't get out immediately. Instead, she pulled out her phone and typed for a long time. "I've seen combat veterans move fast. I've seen martial artists demonstrate incredible technique. What I saw in there wasn't training. What I saw was something else entirely." Marcus stared at the screen, choosing his words carefully. "I've had extensive self-defense training. Military background. Some situations require decisive action. Those men called you by name. They knew you. They were looking for you specifically. Business rivals," he said. "My company handles high-stakes security. Sometimes that makes enemies." Aria looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus felt like she was seeing straight through every careful lie. The woman they mentioned, Celeste. Your intended mate? Marcus closed his eyes. It's complicated. Are you married? No. Engaged? Not exactly. Aria's expression hardened. She typed rapidly. There's someone you're supposed to be with. Someone your family expects you to marry. Yes, Marcus admitted, because he couldn't lie to her about something so important. But it's not what I want. What do you want? The simple question hung between them like a challenge. Marcus looked at this woman, this human woman who was raising a daughter alone, working double shifts to survive, who had every reason to walk away from whatever dangerous world he'd just pulled her into. You, he said simply. I want you. Aria's breath caught. She stared at him, searching his face for lies, for the deception that experience had taught her to expect from men. Instead, she found only honesty, raw, desperate honesty from a man who was clearly fighting his own battles. This is insane, she typed. I don't even know your last name. I don't know what you really do for work. I don't know who those men were, or why they wanted to hurt you. Kane. Marcus Kane. And they didn't want to hurt me, they wanted to control me. Why? Because I have something they need. Authority. Influence. The kind of power that comes with responsibility I never asked for. Aria studied his face, seeing the weight he carried, the loneliness that matched her own. Finally, she typed, I should run. Everything about this screams danger. Smart women don't get involved with men who have enemies kicking down restaurant doors. No, Marcus agreed quietly. They don't. But I'm not feeling very smart right now. Aria. She held up a hand to stop him, then typed again. I felt something tonight. Before those men showed up, before everything went crazy. I felt something I thought I'd never feel again. What? Hope. She showed him the screen, then immediately started typing again. I haven't hoped for anything in so long. Just surviving, just taking care of Rosie, just making it through each day. But tonight, for a few hours, I remembered what it felt like to want something more. Marcus felt his heart clench. You can still have that. We can have that. Can we? With people trying to force you into some arranged marriage? With whatever dangerous life you're obviously living? I don't know, Marcus said honestly. I don't know if I can make you any promises about tomorrow, or next week, or next month. But I know I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I know that when I held your daughter, something in me recognized home. And I know that walking away from you right now would be the biggest mistake of my life. Aria sat in silence for a long time, staring at her phone screen. When she finally looked up, Marcus saw determination in her green eyes. One more date, she typed. But this time I picked the place. Somewhere public, somewhere safe. And you tell me the truth, as much of it as you can. Deal. And if more of your enemies show up, if you put my daughter at risk in any way, I disappear. No explanations, no second chances. Understood. Aria studied his face one more time, then leaned across the console and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. Her lips were soft, warm, and the simple touch sent electricity through his entire system. Thank you, she typed as she pulled back, for protecting me tonight. Whatever else happens, thank you for that. She was out of the car and through her building's front door before Marcus could respond. He sat in the darkness for a long time, her scent still lingering in his car, the phantom sensation of her lips still burning his skin. His phone buzzed. A text from David. Celeste knows about tonight. The Blackwood Wolves reported back. She's demanding a meeting tomorrow. Marcus stared at the message, then at Aria's building. Light flickered on in a third-floor window, her apartment. He could see her silhouette moving around, probably checking on Rosie, settling into the evening routine of single motherhood. He was the alpha king of the Northern Territories. His mate choice would affect thousands of wolves, countless alliances, the balance of power that kept their world stable. Walking away from his obligations would mean war, with the Blackwoods, with half the council, possibly with his own pack. But as he watched Aria's shadow in the window, Marcus knew he was already too far gone to choose duty over his heart. Tomorrow he would face Celeste Blackwood and the consequences of tonight's confrontation. But tonight belonged to the memory of Aria's trust, her hope, and the impossible possibility that love might be worth any price. Even if that price was everything he'd ever known. Chapter 3. 3 weeks after the restaurant incident, Aria found herself humming while she folded Rosie's tiny clothes, something she hadn't done since before her daughter was born. The soft melody died on her lips as she realized what she was doing, replaced by a flutter of panic in her chest. She was falling for Marcus Kane. Hard. It terrified her. The man who had seemed too good to be true was proving to be exactly that. Too good, too perfect, too conveniently available whenever she needed him. Like yesterday, when she'd come home from her morning shift at Murphy's to find her apartment's ancient heating system had finally given up the ghost entirely. She'd been standing in her kitchen, Rosie bundled in 3 blankets, trying to figure out how to afford an emergency repair when Marcus had knocked on her door. He'd taken one look at her red nose and chattering teeth, rolled up his expensive sleeves, and disappeared into the basement with her landlord's grudging permission. 2 hours later, her apartment was warm again. When she'd tried to pay him, he'd waved her off with that gentle smile that made her knees weak. "I know a guy who owes me a favor," he'd said, as if conjuring heating repair miracles was perfectly normal. "Don't worry about it." But Arya was beginning to worry about a lot of things. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Dinner tonight? I'll cook. Your place, 7 p.m. She stared at the message, her heart doing that stupid fluttering thing again. Marcus had been cooking for her twice a week, showing up with bags of groceries and an easy confidence in her tiny kitchen that spoke of a man comfortable taking care of others. He made incredible meals, restaurant-quality food that must have cost more than her weekly grocery budget, and never seemed to expect anything in return except her company. "You don't have to keep feeding us," she typed back. "I want to. Besides, someone needs to make sure you're eating actual meals instead of whatever's cheapest at the corner store." Arya's cheeks heated. She hadn't realized he'd noticed her careful budgeting, the way she chose the marked-down produce and generic brands. But instead of judgment, all she'd ever seen in his eyes was understanding. "Rosie's teething. She might be fussy. I'll bring ice cream for her gums. See you at 7. Arya set down her phone and picked up Rosie, who was indeed gnawing on everything within reach with the single-minded determination of an 8-month-old whose teeth were coming in. "What do you think, baby girl? Is Mommy losing her mind?" Rosie gurgled and grabbed for Arya's hair, which she took as either approval or indifference. Either way, Arya found herself looking forward to 7 o'clock with an anticipation that scared her. Marcus arrived precisely on time, carrying enough groceries to feed a small army and a stuffed elephant that made Rosie shriek with delight. Watching him crouch down to her daughter's level, his expensive suit replaced by dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Arya's rent, she felt that dangerous warmth spreading through her chest again. "How was your day?" he asked, beginning to unpack ingredients with the efficiency of someone who clearly spent time in high-end kitchens. Arya grabbed her notepad. Long Mrs. Henderson complained about her eggs for 20 minutes, then left a 50-cent tip on a $40 order. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Some people don't deserve good service. It's fine. I'm used to it. You shouldn't have to be." The quiet intensity in his voice made her look up sharply. For just a moment, his golden brown eyes held something almost predatory, something that reminded her of the way he'd moved in that restaurant 3 weeks ago. Then Rosie babbled from her high chair, and the moment passed. They fell into an easy routine, Marcus cooking while Arya played with Rosie, the domestic scene so natural it made her chest ache with longing. This was what she'd dreamed of during her pregnancy, alone and terrified and convinced she'd never have a partner to share the load with. Someone who'd help with dinner, who'd make her daughter laugh, who'd look at them both like they were precious. "You're quiet tonight," Marcus said as he plated what looked like restaurant-quality salmon with roasted vegetables. "Just tired," she wrote, which was partly true. She was tired, but more than that, she was overwhelmed by how right this felt, how easy it would be to pretend they were a real family. During dinner, Rosie knocked over her sippy cup for the 3rd time, and Marcus cleaned it up without missing a beat in their conversation. When she started fussing, he automatically handed her the ice-filled teething ring he'd brought, as if he'd been caring for teething babies his entire life. "You're really good with her," Arya typed, showing him the message. Marcus glanced at Rosie, who was contentedly gnawing on her teething ring while watching him with the focused attention babies reserved for their favorite people. "She's easy to love." The simple statement hit Arya like a punch to the solar plexus. She stared at him, looking for the calculation, the manipulation, the angle that experience had taught her all men had when it came to single mothers. Instead, she found only sincerity. "What about her father?" Marcus asked quietly, and Arya's blood turned to ice. She'd been dreading this question for weeks. Her hands shook as she reached for her notepad. "He's not in the picture. Never was really. His loss," Marcus said simply, and moved on to asking about her nursing school applications, as if the topic of Rosie's father was completely closed. But as the evening progressed, Arya found herself cataloging the small things that didn't quite add up. The way Marcus's phone never stopped buzzing with messages he'd glance at and dismiss. The expensive watch on his wrist that caught the light when he reached for the salt. The fact that he'd shown up with $40 worth of groceries for a casual dinner without blinking. When they settled on her second-hand couch to watch a movie, Rosie finally asleep in her bouncer between them, Aria grabbed the remote and scrolled through streaming options. Horror movie? She typed, showing Marcus the screen. Only if you're sure. Some of them can be pretty intense. She selected a supernatural thriller she'd been meaning to watch. Something about werewolves in a small town. As the opening credits rolled, she watched Marcus's face for his reaction. His expression remained perfectly neutral, but she caught the way his hand tightened almost imperceptibly on his beer bottle when the first transformation scene began. Completely unrealistic, he murmured as the werewolf on screen went through an elaborate, painful-looking shift. Real transformations would be much faster. More fluid. Aria paused the movie and stared at him. Real transformations? Marcus's eyes widened slightly, as if he'd just realized what he'd said. I mean, if werewolves were real. Which they're not, obviously. I just meant from a biological standpoint, the physics of it would be. His phone rang, cutting off his explanation. The ringtone was sharp, urgent, and Marcus's entire demeanor changed as he glanced at the screen. I need to take this, he said, already standing. It's work. He stepped onto her small balcony, sliding the glass door closed behind him. But Aria could still hear his voice through the thin walls, speaking in what sounded like German? Russian? Something harsh and guttural that definitely wasn't English. When he came back inside 10 minutes later, his easy smile was back in place, but there was tension around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Sorry about that. Crisis at work. What kind of work requires phone calls in foreign languages at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday? Aria typed. Security consultation. International clients. Marcus settled back on the couch, but she could feel the subtle distance he'd put between them. Where were we? They finished the movie in relative silence, Marcus making occasional comments about the werewolf lore that demonstrated a surprisingly comprehensive knowledge of shapeshifter mythology. When the credits rolled, he helped her clean up the dinner dishes with the same quiet efficiency he brought to everything else. I should go, he said as she dried the last plate. Early meeting tomorrow. But as he gathered his jacket, his phone buzzed again. And again. And again. Popular night, Aria observed in her halting voice. Marcus's smile was strained. Something like that. He kissed her goodnight, a soft, lingering kiss that made her forget all her questions for a moment, and left her standing in her doorway, watching him walk to his car with that fluid grace that reminded her uncomfortably of a predator. The next morning, Aria was wiping down tables at Murphy's when Sarah slid into a corner booth, looking uncharacteristically serious. We need to talk, Sarah said without preamble. Aria grabbed her notepad. What's wrong? That guy you're seeing, Marcus. There are some weird things happening around him. Aria's stomach dropped. What kind of weird things? Sarah glanced around the diner to make sure they weren't being overheard. Jake, you remember Jake from my apartment building? The one who works for that private security company downtown. Aria nodded. She vaguely remembered meeting Jake at one of Sarah's parties. He says there's been chatter in the security world about some high-profile client who's been making waves. Someone with serious money and serious enemies. And get this, Jake thinks it might be your Marcus. That's ridiculous, Aria wrote, but her hand was shaking. Is it? Aria, have you Googled this guy? Have you tried to find anything about him online? Aria's face must have given her away, because Sarah leaned forward urgently. You haven't, have you? Honey, I love how happy you've been these past few weeks, but you don't know anything about him. Not really. I know enough. Do you? Do you know where he lives? Where he works exactly? Do you know why expensive cars keep circling your block on the nights he comes over? Aria's blood turned to ice. What cars? Black sedans. Tinted windows. Mrs. Rodriguez in 4B mentioned them to me yesterday. She's convinced they're either cops or gangsters. The notepad slipped from Aria's numb fingers. She thought about Marcus's perfect timing, always showing up exactly when she needed him. His expensive clothes and casual attitude toward money. The way he'd handled those men in the restaurant with inhuman speed and strength. The foreign language phone calls. His encyclopedic knowledge of werewolf lore. There's something else, Sarah said gently. Yesterday, when I was picking up coffee before work, I saw a guy taking pictures outside your building. Professional camera, telephoto lens. When I tried to get closer, he disappeared. What kind of pictures? I don't know. But Aria, What if Marcus isn't who he says he is? The rest of Aria's shift passed in a blur. Every time the diner's door chimed, she expected to see Marcus walk in with that gentle smile that made her forget all her doubts. But he didn't come, and by closing time, she'd worked herself into a state of barely controlled panic. She was walking to her car when she noticed the black sedan parked across the street. Tinted windows, expensive looking, exactly like Sarah had described. As she fumbled with her keys, trying not to look directly at the car, she saw the driver's side window roll down, just enough for the lens of a camera to emerge. Aria's heart hammered as she drove home, checking her rearview mirror every few seconds. The sedan followed her for 3 blocks before disappearing into traffic, leaving her wondering if she'd imagined the whole thing. Her hands were still shaking when she unlocked her apartment door to find Marcus standing in her kitchen, stirring something on the stove while Rosie giggled from her high chair. "Hey," he said, turning to smile at her. "Mrs. Patterson downstairs let me in. Hope you don't mind, I wanted to surprise you." For a moment, the sight of him in her domestic space, so right, so perfect, made her forget all her fears. Then she noticed his suit jacket draped over her chair, expensive fabric that probably cost more than she made in a month. "How did you get in without a key?" She typed. "Mrs. Patterson recognized me. She said you'd told her I was your boyfriend." Marcus's smile was warm, but Aria caught the way his eyes searched her face. "Is that what you told her?" Maybe. I like the sound of that." Marcus moved toward her, and Aria had to force herself not to step back. "Are you okay? You look upset. Long day." But as Marcus pulled her into his arms, as his familiar scent surrounded her and his solid warmth chased away her fears, Aria found herself melting against him despite everything. This was Marcus, the man who'd held her daughter like she was precious, who'd fixed her heater without being asked, who looked at her like she was worth something. He couldn't be dangerous. Could he? "I missed you today," he murmured against her hair. "You saw me yesterday. Still missed you." They ate dinner together, another perfectly prepared meal that must have cost a fortune. And Aria tried to ignore the way Marcus's phone kept lighting up with messages he consistently ignored. Tried not to notice how he seemed to know exactly when Rosie would get fussy, exactly how she liked her bottles prepared, exactly which lullaby would put her to sleep. Like he'd been studying them. After Rosie was down for the night, they settled on the couch with wine Marcus had brought, something that probably cost more than Aria's weekly grocery budget. She curled against his side, trying to ignore the questions circling in her mind like vultures. "Marcus," she said in her halting voice, the words coming out barely above a whisper. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Who are you? Really?" Marcus went very still beneath her. "What do you mean?" I don't know anything about you. Where you live, who your friends are, why you always have so much money but never seem to work regular hours. I told you I run a security business. What kind of security business requires phone calls in foreign languages? What kind of security business means expensive cars following me home from work?" Marcus was quiet for so long that Aria lifted her head to look at him. His golden eyes were distant, calculating, and for a moment she saw something in them that chilled her, something wild and dangerous that he kept carefully hidden. "There are things about my life that are complicated," he said finally. "Things I can't explain right now. Can't or won't. Both." Marcus's arms tightened around her. "Aria, I know how this sounds, but I need you to trust me. Just a little longer. Are you in some kind of trouble? Not the kind you're thinking of. What kind then?" Marcus was quiet again, and Aria could practically hear him weighing his words. "The kind where telling you the truth might put you and Rosie in more danger than keeping you in the dark." The honest admission sent ice through her veins. She pulled away from him, putting physical distance between them as her mind raced. "So there is danger." "There's always danger around me," Marcus said quietly. "I've been trying to keep it away from you." "By lying to me?" "By protecting you." Aria stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the street looked normal, no black sedans, no mysterious photographers. But she no longer trusted her own perception of normal. "I can't do this," she typed, showing him the screen without turning around. "I can't build something with someone who won't tell me the truth. I've been down that road before." "Aria, please." Rosie's father was full of secrets too. Full of promises that everything would be explained eventually, that I just needed to trust him a little longer. Marcus was behind her now. She could feel his warmth at her back. "I'm not him." "How do I know that?" "Because he left." Marcus's voice was rough, barely controlled. "And I'm here. I'm here every day, trying to earn the right to be part of your life." Arya closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten. By lying to me. By protecting you from a world you don't understand. A world that would destroy everything good in your life if it knew you existed. She turned to face him then, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Pain, longing, and something that looked almost like fear. What world? Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and Arya saw him wrestling with himself, saw the moment he made his decision. The supernatural world, he said quietly. A world where what happened in that restaurant 3 weeks ago was barely a skirmish. A world where the wrong people knowing about you and Rosie could mean losing you both forever. Arya's legs went weak. She sank onto the couch, staring at him as pieces began clicking into place. You're serious. Dead serious. The men in the restaurant weren't entirely human. And you aren't entirely human either. The room went dead silent except for the hum of her ancient refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. Arya stared at Marcus, looking for signs of mental illness, for the cruel smile that would indicate this was all some elaborate joke. Instead, she found only truth, raw, terrifying truth from a man who looked like he was bracing for her to run screaming from the room. What are you? She finally typed. Marcus took a deep breath. I'm what you might call a werewolf, though we prefer the term shapeshifter. And those men? Also shapeshifters. From a rival pack. Pack. Like a family. A community. Marcus hesitated, then forged ahead. I'm their leader. Arya processed this information with the surreal calm of someone whose world had just shifted fundamentally off its axis. She thought about Marcus's inhuman speed in the restaurant, his extensive knowledge of werewolf lore, his perfect instincts with Rosie. The woman they mentioned, Celeste, is from another pack, a political alliance that my advisors want me to make. An arranged marriage. Yes, but you don't want it. No, I want you. The simple statement hung between them like a bridge. One Arya could either cross or burn. She looked at this man who had somehow become essential to her happiness in just a few short weeks. This man who had lied to her about the most fundamental aspect of his identity, who had brought danger to her doorstep, who belonged to a world she couldn't begin to understand. This man who looked at her daughter like she was precious, who had never once made Arya feel like a burden, who was currently watching her with the expression of someone whose entire world hung on her next words. Show me, she typed. Marcus blinked. What? If you're really what you say you are, show me. Arya, I don't think. Show me or leave. Those are your options. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Not here. If Rosie wakes up. The roof. There's access through the stairwell. 10 minutes later, they stood on the roof of her building under a canopy of stars, the city sprawling below them in a tapestry of lights. Marcus had been quiet during the climb, and now he stood several feet away from her, tension radiating from every line of his body. Are you sure about this? He asked. Arya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Arya heard something, a sound like fabric tearing, like bones realigning. Marcus's body began to blur, to shift, and suddenly where a man had been standing, there was something else entirely. The wolf was enormous, easily the size of a small horse, with dark fur that gleamed silver in the moonlight. Its eyes, Marcus's eyes, were the same golden brown, intelligent and achingly familiar. Arya stared, her scientific mind trying to process what she was seeing while her heart hammered against her ribs. The wolf took a tentative step toward her, and she saw Marcus in the careful way it moved, the gentle intelligence in its gaze. Slowly, hardly daring to breathe, Arya extended her hand. The wolf, Marcus, stepped forward and nudged her palm with his massive head. His fur was impossibly soft, warm, and she could feel the rumble of contentment in his chest as she stroked behind his ears. My God, she whispered, the words coming out in her broken voice. You're beautiful. The transformation back was quicker, smoother, and suddenly Marcus was kneeling in front of her in human form, naked from the waist up, watching her face with desperate intensity. Say something, he pleaded. Anything. Arya reached out and touched his face, tracing the familiar lines of his jaw, the cheekbones she'd memorized, the lips that had kissed her goodnight just hours ago. You're still you, she whispered. The relief that flooded Marcus's expression was so profound it made her chest ache. He caught her hand and pressed it flat against his chest, over his heart. I'm still me, he confirmed. I'm still the man who's falling in love with you. The admission hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, seeing past the supernatural revelation to the fundamental truth beneath. This was Marcus, the man who had somehow become necessary to her happiness, who looked at her daughter like she was precious, who was currently watching her like his entire world hung on her acceptance. "I need time," she finally typed on her phone. "To think. To process." Marcus nodded, pulling his shirt back on. "Of course. This is a lot." "It is. But Marcus?" "Yeah. Thank you. For trusting me with the truth." They made their way back down to her apartment in silence, both lost in thought. At her door, Marcus hesitated. "I know you need space," he said quietly. "But there are things you need to know. Precautions you need to take. The supernatural world isn't just werewolves, and not all of them are as friendly as I am." "Tomorrow," Arya typed. "We'll talk tomorrow." Marcus nodded and kissed her forehead gently. "Lock the door behind me. And Arya, if anything feels wrong, anything at all, call me immediately." After he left, Arya stood in her dark apartment, listening to Rosie's soft breathing from the nursery and trying to reconcile everything she thought she knew about the world with what she'd just learned. Marcus was a werewolf, a shapeshifter who led a pack of other shapeshifters, who was being pressured into a political marriage, who had enemies who might see her and Rosie as leverage. She should be terrified. She should be packing their bags and disappearing into the night. Instead, she found herself thinking about the gentle way the wolf had nuzzled her hand, the relief in Marcus's eyes when she hadn't run screaming, the fundamental truth that he was still the same man who had been fixing her life one small kindness at a time. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A photo attachment loaded slowly on her ancient device, and when it finally appeared, Arya's blood turned to ice. It was a picture of her and Marcus on the roof, taken with a telephoto lens from a neighboring building. In the image, she was clearly visible reaching out to touch what looked like an enormous wolf. Below the photo was a single line of text: "The Alpha King has found his weakness." How interesting. Arya stared at the message, her hands shaking. Someone had been watching them. Someone had photographed Marcus's transformation, had seen her acceptance of his true nature. Someone now knew exactly how to hurt the most powerful werewolf in the Northern Territories. And they had chosen her as their weapon. Chapter 4. Arya stared at the threatening text message until her eyes burned. The image of herself reaching toward Marcus's wolf form seared into her memory. Someone had been watching them. Someone who knew exactly what Marcus was and what her acceptance meant. She barely slept that night, jumping at every sound in the hallway, checking and rechecking the locks on her door. When Rosie woke for her middle-of-the-night feeding, Arya found herself positioning the rocking chair where she could see both the front door and the fire escape, her daughter's innocent babbling the only thing keeping her grounded. By morning, dark circles shadowed her eyes and her hands shook as she prepared Rosie's bottle. Her phone had been mercifully quiet since the mysterious message, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, hunted. The rational part of her mind said she should call Marcus immediately, tell him about the threat. But every time she reached for her phone, she hesitated. He'd said the supernatural world was dangerous, that knowing about her could put her in more danger than staying in the dark. Well, now someone clearly knew about both of them, and she had no idea how to navigate waters she didn't understand. Her morning shift at Murphy's Diner passed in a haze of spilled coffee and distracted service. The regular customers seemed to sense her mood, leaving smaller tips and making increasingly irritated comments about her clumsiness. By lunchtime, her manager Joe was giving her concerned looks. "You okay, Arya?" he asked during a brief lull. "You seem off today." She grabbed her notepad from her apron pocket. "Just tired. Rosie was fussy last night. Maybe you should take the afternoon off. Maria can cover your tables." Arya shook her head quickly. She needed the money, needed the distraction, needed something normal to anchor her to the world she understood. "I'm fine. Really." But she wasn't fine, and things were about to get much worse. The diner's bell chimed at exactly 2:00, and Arya looked up from wiping down table 6 to see a woman who could have stepped out of a high-fashion magazine. Tall and willowy, with platinum blonde hair that fell in perfect waves to her shoulders, she wore a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than Arya made in 6 months. Her skin was flawless porcelain, her makeup subtle but expertly applied, and when she moved, it was with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to being watched, admired, obeyed. But it was her eyes that made Arya's blood run cold. Ice blue and calculating, they swept the diner with the predatory assessment of a hunter sizing up prey. The woman's gaze found Arya and stopped, lips curving in a smile that never reached those Arctic eyes. She walked directly to Arya's section, sliding into a corner booth with the deliberate precision of someone who had planned this encounter down to the smallest detail. "Well," the woman said, her voice cultured and smooth as silk, "you must be Aria Thorne." Aria's hand tightened on her order pad. She hadn't given the woman her name, hadn't seen her before in her life. But those ice-blue eyes held recognition, and something far more dangerous, satisfaction. "Can I help you?" Aria wrote on her pad, showing it to the woman. "Oh, how quaint. You really are mute, aren't you?" The woman's smile widened, showing perfect white teeth. "I wasn't entirely sure the reports were accurate. I'm Vivian Blackwood, though I suspect Marcus has mentioned me." The name hit Aria like a physical blow. Vivian, not Celeste, as those men in the restaurant had said. But the claim was unmistakable. This was the woman Marcus was supposed to marry. "I don't know what you're talking about," Aria wrote, her hand shaking slightly. "Oh, darling, please. We both know exactly why I'm here." Vivian leaned back in the booth, perfectly at ease. "Marcus Kane, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, has been playing house with a little human waitress and her bastard child. Did you really think no one would notice?" The casual cruelty of the words, delivered in that honeyed voice, made Aria's vision blur. She looked around the diner desperately, hoping Joe would intervene, but he was in the back office doing paperwork. "You need to leave," Aria wrote. "Oh, I don't think so. You see, we need to have a conversation about your relationship with my intended mate." "He's not your mate. Isn't he?" Vivian reached into her designer purse and pulled out a sleek tablet, swiping through what appeared to be official documents. "Alliance agreement between the Blackwood and Kane packs, signed by both our fathers when we were children. Marriage contract, approved by the Northern Territories Council. Mating ceremony scheduled for the winter solstice." She turned the tablet so Aria could see the formal documents, Marcus's signature clearly visible at the bottom of several pages. "Marcus has obligations, darling. To his pack, to our alliance, to the continuation of strong bloodlines. What he doesn't have is the luxury of slumming with damaged human goods." Aria's face burned with humiliation and rage. She started to write a response, but Vivian continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "Did he tell you what you really are to him? You're an Omega, sweet thing. I can smell it on you even in human form, all that lovely submission and fertility just rolling off you in waves. To an alpha like Marcus, you're basically a walking pheromone factory. No wonder he's been sniffing around. You're lying." "Am I? Tell me, has he ever lost control around you? Ever seemed almost feral in his desire? That's not love, darling. That's biology. You're triggering every breeding instinct he has, but that doesn't make you mate material." Aria's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the pen. Everything Vivian was saying aligned with things she'd noticed: Marcus's intensity, the way his eyes sometimes seemed to glow when he looked at her, the almost desperate way he held her sometimes. A true mate for an alpha king needs to be strong, sophisticated, capable of managing pack politics and territorial negotiations. "Tell me, what languages do you speak? What experience do you have with supernatural law? Can you even defend yourself, let alone a pack of several thousand wolves?" "I don't need to defend." "Of course you do. That's what being a pack queen means. It means being a partner who strengthens your mate's position, not a liability who weakens it." Vivian's smile turned pitying. "Look at yourself, sweetheart. You can't even speak. How exactly do you think you'd address the Pack Council? How would you represent the Northern Territories in diplomatic negotiations?" Each word was a calculated strike at Aria's deepest insecurities. She thought about the foreign language phone calls Marcus took, the expensive clothes and cars, the world of power and politics he'd hinted at but never fully explained. "And then there's your daughter," Vivian continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Born of weak human stock, sired by some nobody who abandoned her. Do you really think the pack would accept a bastard halfling as potential heir to the Northern Territories?" "Stop." Aria's writing was barely legible now. "Marcus needs strong children, legitimate heirs who can hold their own against challenges from rival packs. Your little Rose is pretty enough, I'm sure, but she'll never be more than a burden to him. A reminder of his foolish dalliance with a pathetic mute Omega who could never be queen." Aria shot to her feet, so quickly her chair toppled backward, drawing stares from the other customers. Tears were streaming down her face, but she couldn't seem to stop them. Every cruel word Vivian had spoken felt like truth, confirming every doubt she'd harbored about her relationship with Marcus. "You don't know anything about us," she wrote frantically. "Don't I?" Vivian pulled out her phone and showed Aria the screen. It was the same photo from last night, Arya reaching toward Marcus's wolf form, but the angle was different, clearer. Someone's been very thorough in documenting Marcus's little walk on the wild side. This image is already circulating through the supernatural networks, by the way. Everyone knows about you now. Arya stared at the photo, seeing herself through hostile eyes for the first time. She looked small, vulnerable, completely out of place in Marcus's supernatural world. The Pack Council is meeting tomorrow to discuss the situation, Vivian continued. They're not pleased that their Alpha King has been compromising Pack security by involving a human in supernatural affairs. Especially a human who's now a known liability. What do you mean? I mean, darling, that your very existence has become a threat to Pack stability. An Alpha King who can be manipulated through his human pet is an Alpha King who can be controlled. Marcus's enemies will use you against him, and his allies are already questioning his judgment. Vivian stood, smoothing down her perfect coat. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk away from Marcus Kane. You're going to take your bastard child and disappear from his life completely. And in return, I'll make sure the Pack Council votes to leave you alone. And if I don't, Vivian's smile was arctic. Then you'll learn exactly how creative supernatural beings can be when it comes to dealing with threats to their security. Your daughter is half human, Arya. That makes her vulnerable to our kind in ways you can't even imagine. The threat to Rosie cut through Arya like a knife. She grabbed the edge of the table for support, her legs suddenly unsteady. I can see you understand me now, Vivian said with satisfaction. Good. You have 24 hours to cut all contact with Marcus. Block his number, refuse to see him, make it clear that you want nothing to do with him or his world. He'll know something's wrong. He'll come looking. Oh, I doubt that. You see, I'll be having my own conversation with Marcus tonight. I'll explain that you learned about his true nature and realized you could never be part of it. That you begged me to make him leave you alone because you're terrified of what he is. He won't believe you, won't he? A mute single mother, overwhelmed by the revelation that her boyfriend is a dangerous supernatural predator? It sounds entirely reasonable to me. Vivian's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. Besides, I have evidence. She swiped her phone screen again, showing Arya another photo. This one appeared to show Arya backing away from Marcus's wolf form, her face a mask of terror. But Arya remembered the moment. She'd been reaching toward him, not away. The angle and timing of the photo made her look frightened when she'd actually been amazed. Photo manipulation is such a useful skill, Vivian said conversationally. I have an entire series showing your rejection of Marcus's true nature. Very convincing, don't you think? Arya stared at the doctored images, seeing how they could be used to destroy everything she and Marcus had built together. The woman was thorough, calculating, and utterly ruthless. 24 hours, Arya. For your daughter's sake, I hope you make the right choice. Vivian left the diner without ordering anything, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive perfume and the wreckage of Arya's world. Arya stood frozen by the table, tears streaming down her face, until Joe emerged from the back office and found her there. Jesus, Arya, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. She fumbled for her notepad with shaking hands. I need to go home. Please. I need to go home. Joe took one look at her devastated expression and nodded immediately. Go. Take tomorrow off too if you need it. Maria can cover your shifts. The walk home felt like a death march. Every step took her further from the life she'd begun to imagine with Marcus, closer to the reality of what she really was. A liability he couldn't afford to keep. By the time she reached her building, Arya had made her decision. She couldn't risk Rosie's safety, couldn't be the weakness that brought down the man she loved. The photos Vivian had shown her made it clear that her relationship with Marcus was already being used against him. She had to let him go. Mrs. Patterson was just collecting her mail when Arya stumbled through the lobby, and the older woman took one look at her tear-stained face and immediately offered to watch Rosie. Honey, you look like you need some time to yourself, she said gently. Why don't you let me take the baby for a few hours? Arya nodded gratefully, too emotionally drained to even attempt communication. She handed over Rosie's diaper bag and kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in her innocent baby scent before letting Mrs. Patterson take her away. Alone in her apartment, Arya pulled out her phone and stared at Marcus's contact information. Her thumb hovered over the block button for a long time before she finally pressed it. The finality of the action hit her like a physical blow. She sank onto her couch and let herself cry, for the relationship she was giving up, for the life she'd begun to imagine, for the man who would think she'd rejected him when the truth was that she was trying to protect him. Her phone rang an hour later, showing an unknown number. She ignored it, then again, and again. Finally, a text appeared from the same unknown number. "Aria, it's Marcus. Why is my number blocked? What's wrong?" She stared at the message, her heart breaking all over again. How could she explain? How could she make him understand without telling him about Vivian's threats? "I can't do this anymore," she finally typed back. "I'm sorry. What happened? Let me come over. We can talk about whatever's wrong." "No. Please don't come here. I need space." "Aria, this is about last night, isn't it? About what I showed you. I know it was a lot to process. It's about everything. Your world, the danger, all of it. I can't risk Rosie's safety." The phone went quiet for a long time. When it buzzed again, Marcus's message was shorter. "I understand. But please, can we just talk? Face to face?" "No. I'm sorry, Marcus. This is over." She turned off her phone after that, unable to bear whatever response he might send. The silence in her apartment felt oppressive, filled with the ghosts of all the evenings they'd spent together, all the might-have-beens that would never be. 3 hours later, someone knocked on her door. Aria's heart leaped, thinking it might be Marcus ignoring her requests for space. But when she looked through the peephole, she saw Vivian Blackwood standing in the hallway, looking as perfectly composed as ever. "I know you're in there, darling," Vivian called softly. "We need to chat." Aria opened the door reluctantly, not inviting the other woman inside. "I thought you'd want to know," Vivian said, her ice-blue eyes sparkling with satisfaction, "that I just finished having a lovely conversation with Marcus. I showed him the photos, explained how terrified you were when you learned what he really was. He's devastated, of course, but he understands. He won't be bothering you anymore." The casual cruelty in Vivian's voice made Aria sick to her stomach. "He asked me to tell you that he's sorry for bringing danger into your life," Vivian continued. "He wants you to know that he'll make sure no one from our world ever bothers you again. Quite noble of him, really." "You're lying." "Am I?" "Check your phone, darling. I suspect you'll find a farewell message waiting for you." With shaking hands, Aria turned her phone back on. Sure enough, there was a text from Marcus's temporary number. "I'm sorry for everything. You and Rosie deserve a safe, normal life. I won't contact you again. Be happy, Aria. That's all I ever wanted for you." The message felt like a knife to the heart. Even in what he believed was her rejection, Marcus was thinking of her happiness, trying to protect her from his world. "Perfect, isn't it?" Vivian said, watching Aria read the message. "He thinks he's being noble, setting you free from the dangerous supernatural world. Meanwhile, I get my intended mate back, and you get to fade into obscurity where you belong. You don't know him at all if you think this is over." "Oh, but it is. You see, darling, Marcus is honorable to a fault. If he believes you've rejected him for valid reasons, which, thanks to my carefully curated evidence, he absolutely does, then he'll respect that decision even if it destroys him." Vivian stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And between you and me, it is destroying him. I've never seen an alpha look so broken. But don't worry, I'll be there to help him heal. To remind him of his duties and responsibilities. By the time of our mating ceremony, this unfortunate episode will be nothing but a distant memory. He doesn't love you." "Love?" Vivian laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Darling, love is for children and fairy tales. Marcus and I are adults with adult responsibilities. We'll build something much stronger than love. We'll build an empire." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Aria? If you're thinking about changing your mind, about trying to reach out to Marcus with some last-minute confession of undying devotion, don't. The supernatural world has a long memory for those who cause problems. Your daughter may be safe now, but that protection only extends as long as you stay away from what doesn't belong to you." With that final threat, Vivian was gone, leaving Aria alone with the wreckage of her heart and the terrible knowledge that she'd just lost the only man she'd ever truly loved. She sank to the floor by her door, clutching her phone with Marcus's farewell message still glowing on the screen. Somewhere across the city, he was probably believing the worst about her, that she'd taken one look at his true nature and run screaming. The truth was so much worse. She'd seen exactly who he was, supernatural and all, and loved him anyway. But love wasn't enough when it came with a target painted on her daughter's back. As night fell over the city, Aria grieved for what might have been, while across town, Marcus Kane stared out at the skyline and wondered how he'd managed to lose the only woman who'd ever made him feel truly human. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, Like and share this video to be the first to get notified when the part 2 of this story drops.